One of the lovely things about RUSI audiences is they are so well behaved. A simple grumble from the platform and everybody goes quiet. So thank you all very much for turning up for this event on great power competition in the Arctic and the High North. The discussion will be entirely on the record. After my initial remarks, we will have separate presentations from both our speakers. I will then ask them some questions, and then there will be plenty of time for questions from the floor and from the ether as well, if our IT works, which of course it always does. It's my really very great pleasure to welcome State Secretary Aanerud from the Norwegian Ministry of Defence to speak with us today. She joined her current position in 2023 after serving as an advisor to the Armed Forces and in multiple other positions, I believe most recently as State Secretary with the Norwegian Prime Minister, and I'm looking forward to what she has to say. I'm also delighted to welcome Lord Vernon Coaker, the Minister of State for Defence responsible for international relations. I think it's the first time you've been at RUSI in your new capacity, Vernon. But you're very well known, of course, to many of us at RUSI, a long time engagement with defence issues when Labour was in opposition and indeed served as Shadow Defence Secretary for some time. So he's a good friend of UK defence and an astute observer of international security. I'm also looking forward to what he has to say. For me, it's a particular pleasure to chair this session because I spent most of last week in Norway, in Svalbard as it happens, as a guest of the Policy Directorate in your Ministry of Defence, talking European security in the most northerly town on the planet, which I think gave me some perspective, I hope, for discussions of Arctic security. And I had the very distinct honour of spending a couple of days as a guest on board your brand new and impressive Coast Guard vessel, Jan Mayen, and we visited the International Research Station there, which also gave one a real insight into the problems and pace of environmental change in the Arctic, which is perhaps as rapid as anywhere on the planet and is very worrying for all of us. My biggest disappointment was that I failed to see any polar bears, but we talked about them a lot, and every Norwegian I met had joke about polar bears, most of which were intended to scare the outsiders into thinking one was just round the corner. So, which was a testament, I think, to the Norwegian sense of humour, which I think they share with the British. I'm not sure who's best, I won't get into that. So before letting me talk any longer, let me turn over to the State Secretary to give the first presentation, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Chalmers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to speak about the core strategic issue of Norwegian security policy, the High North and the Arctic. I am grateful to the Royal United Services Institute, the Royal Norwegian Embassy here in London, and the Fridtjof Nansen Institute for arranging this seminar, because this truly is a very important topic for us that should be discussed more and should be more widely understood than it is today. And the reason for that is because we meet on a very serious backdrop. As we all know, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine was a watershed moment in European history. We are today witnessing death and destruction in Europe on a scale that I think most of us a few years back didn't think we would ever see anymore. Yet, here it is. It is a concern to every single country in Europe. We face an imperialistic Russia that is seeking to create a different Europe by force. Ukraine's fight in this war is therefore our fight. Russia's invasion, or rather full-scale invasion of Ukraine, has been a real wake-up call for Norway, to be frank. Russia is our neighbor. We share a land border and a maritime border with Russia in the high north. And we cannot change our geography. So Norway now has to contend with a more dangerous and unpredictable Russia in the years to come. We are also witnessing the rise of China, a China that is behaving more assertively and that is increasingly challenging the prevailing world order, which have served European countries very well since the end of the Second World War. At the same time, Russia and China are strengthening their strategic partnership, a partnership that we are watching very closely. We see increased pressure on international law, and we see authoritarian states seeking to undermine liberal values and our security interests. Great power competition is the new normal, and with that comes a heightened risk of misunderstandings and escalation. The likelihood of conflict involving Norway or our allies has increased. We are facing a more unpredictable, complex, and dangerous situation than we have seen for a long time. And we have to acknowledge that even when the war in Ukraine ends, the world will no longer be the same. This tension, although it originates from somewhere else, is also being felt in the Arctic and in the high north. The reason for that is that this is a strategically important region to Norway, to Russia, to our close allies, and increasingly also to China. We must therefore expect great power competition in this region. The consequences of climate change and Russia's war in Ukraine is already impacting geopolitics in the Arctic. Let me start with climate change. Global warming is accelerating, and the Arctic region is warming more than 4 times faster than the rest of the world. This region will become more accessible due to rising temperatures and more melting sea ice. And we should expect more civilian and military activity to follow as a consequence of that. This includes increased interests for transit routes, natural resources, and tourism. The harsh climate in the high north, combined with climate change, will have an effect on military operational concepts and activity, on the use of new technology and equipment, and on the way we do our training. At the same time, increased activity in this region will elevate the risk of misunderstandings, accidents, and unintended escalation. Our ability to calibrate activity to achieve our intended effects is therefore key. My second point is the consequence of Russia's war in Ukraine. Russia is now relying very heavily on a strategy of nuclear deterrence, as it has suffered great conventional losses in Ukraine. And a very significant amount of Russia's nuclear capabilities are based in the high north on the Kola Peninsula, very close to the Norwegian border. The importance of Russia's northern fleet has also increased lately because the Russian Navy in the Black Sea is now locked in. At the same time, the Baltic Sea has become a less accessible and more challenging place for Russia to operate in because every single country around the Baltic Sea is now a NATO member, following Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO. For Russia, it is therefore vital to be able to project naval power in the Euro-Atlantic area from the Kola Peninsula. It is the only place where they can easily access the Atlantic from. To meet the more demanding security situation that we are facing, Norway is working along three main lines of effort. First, we are strengthening our national defense. Second, we are investing in NATO because Norway's security is dependent on NATO and on close cooperation with allies. Thirdly, we continue to support Ukraine in their efforts against the Russian invasion. I will now elaborate on these three lines of efforts, starting with the strengthening our national defense. In April this year, the Norwegian government launched our new defense pledge. This is a very ambitious long-term plan, a comprehensive plan for the defense sector, and has an historic increase in our defense investments. Earlier, our national defense plans used to span 4 years. This plan spans 12 years. And it's also much more ambitious when it comes to defense spending than previous plans have been. In June, the plan was unanimously adopted by Parliament in a historic vote in the Norwegian Parliament. They even agreed, all political parties, on every single comment to the government's proposal. As a result of that vote, we will now substantially increase our defense spending so that we will hit the 2% target this year, and the plan's budget will put us on the path to reach 3% spending on defense by 2036. So within 12 years, we'll go from 2 to 3% spending on defense. The long-term plan is to increase spending by close to £45 billion over the next 12 years. This is a massive boost for Norway. It means that in 12 years, our budget will almost have doubled in real terms. All services will be strengthened with more personnel and new capabilities, including in the High North. And let me give you just a brief overview of what the plan means. Our first priority is maintaining situational awareness in the High North. We have, as a country, considerable maritime interests, and very close to our border with Russia is their nuclear submarine force on the Kola Peninsula. So surveillance is a key priority for Norway. We will invest in new strategic surveillance drones for increased maritime surveillance. Our fleet of P-8 maritime patrol aircrafts will soon be fully operational, and space-based capabilities will become more important in order to maintain situational awareness and freedom of action in the High North. And we aim to make significant investments in satellite systems over the next decade. We are, as a nation, in the process of building a complete industrial value chain for space, from the construction of satellites to a nationally owned spaceport capable of launching both military and civilian rockets. In the maritime domain, we are also making very substantial investments. Norway's sea areas are almost 7 times larger than the land area. The Navy will therefore be a key priority in our new long-term plan. We will procure at least 5 new frigates with anti-submarine warfare capacity and 6 new submarines. At the same time, we will develop and procure up to 28 surface vessels that will serve both our Coast Guard and our Navy. It will be based on a standardized vessel class, based on civilian standards, so as to keep costs down. It's a very innovative strategy that we haven't tried before. Hopefully, we will be successful. Air defense is another key priority for us. In the air domain, we have already received our new P-8 MPA planes and 40 out of our 52 F-35s. In the coming years, the number of NASAMS mid-range air defense systems will be doubled from 4 to 8, and we will also invest in long-range air defense systems to protect against short-range ballistic missiles. In the land domain, the Army will be expanded from 1 to 3 brigades. Our special forces will get new helicopters. Our home guard will increase in volume and in capabilities. And we will invest in long-range precision weapons, additional combat vehicles, air defense systems, and helicopters for the Army. The second line, so that's basically a very, very short version of what we are going to do with our own national defense over the next 12 years. There is much more to talk about, but I think we'll keep it at that. Our second line of effort in the Norwegian security policy is to further strengthen our investment in NATO and in our relationship with close allies. NATO's capability targets are an important input to our new defense plan, and our national plans now align very well with NATO's capability targets for Norway. It is a top priority for Norway to improve interoperability with allies, including in the High North. And the investments that I've just talked about will enhance our ability to support and receive allied forces. The security and stability of the High North is still going to be dependent on NATO and the presence of our NATO allies. The enlargement of NATO with Finland and Sweden changes the dynamic in the Nordic region. Remember, we have been NATO members since the inception, but never until now have we shared a land border with an ally. This happened when Finland joined, and later Sweden. And that way, the High North and what happens in the High North becomes more connected to the Baltic Sea that lies south of us. And Norway becomes more important as a transition nation for allied investments. Allied reinforcements. We will now have a key role in defending our neighbors that we have never had before as a NATO member, because we have just not had any neighbors that have been NATO members. The UK also plays a key role in the High North, and the UK is Norway's most important European ally. The UK and Norway have a long-lasting and very close relationship when it comes to maritime operations in the Arctic. We share a common interest in maintaining situational awareness in the region, and especially in the underwater domain. protection of seabed infrastructure, and the ability to handle Russian submarine activity in our areas of interest is of great importance to both Norway and to the UK. It is an important consideration for us to demonstrate Allied presence in High North. And our activity together with the UK constitutes important signaling to Russia. We also work very closely together in a trilateral format together with the US in the High North. In this area, the UK, Norway, and the US exercise and train regularly on making our deterrence and defense more credible and integrated. Our cooperation on the integration of fifth-generation assets and multi-domain operations in a contested environment is vital in this effort. It remains key that we continue to coordinate and calibrate our activities closely to ensure that we achieve our desired objectives and that we avoid unintended escalation in this very sensitive and strategic region. We are very grateful for UK leadership in NATO and in GEF, and let me also add, in supporting Ukraine. The organizations that I just mentioned provide the backbone to Northern European security, and we must together work to strengthen these organizations in the way they work. Norway looks forward in 2025 to join UK's carrier strike group to the Indo-Pacific region. This will be a big boost for Norway's Navy, and it will demonstrate our ability to cooperate with allies and partners in complex operations for a longer period of time. I think it's safe to say that it will also improve our already excellent relationship with the UK. The third and final line of effort in Norway's security policy is, as I mentioned, continued support to Ukraine. Thank you again for the strong leadership that the UK has shown on Ukraine. And as I said earlier, we do not see this war only as Ukraine's legitimate and necessary fight for its own freedom and sovereignty, but we see this also as part of a larger conflict between the democratic countries of the Western world and authoritarian states. Therefore, in 2023, Norway established a 5-year program called the Nansen program, which is a £5.5 billion fund that spans 5 years. It has unanimous support in Parliament, and it has a military and a civilian component. We have worked very closely with the UK in order to support Ukraine in the best possible way using the funds coming out of that Nansen program. Let me also underline the importance of the UK and Norway, both long-standing maritime powers, heading the Maritime Capability Coalition to help Ukraine build its future navy. This is an important priority where our two countries has a common and particular expertise. We are focusing other support efforts on air defense and F-16 support to Ukraine in cooperation with several other states. The war in Ukraine has changed Europe, and the war is likely to last for a long time. There is no indications that Russian objectives in this war have changed. We must therefore stand firmly behind the continued support for Ukraine to repel Russian aggression, both for the interests of Ukraine, but also for the interests of the rest of the European countries. Friends, Our common security must be defended every day. It must be defended at home and abroad, in the Arctic and elsewhere. With the new defense pledge, Norway is taking a greater responsibility for our own, but also for allies' security. We will continue to maintain and strengthen our situational awareness in the High North. We will build more capable and more resilient air, land, and sea forces, and train and conduct exercises with allies in the Arctic region. We will, in the coming years, use significantly more resources on defense, security, readiness, and resilience. An important part of our efforts is to cooperate more closely with allies. The UK, which is our most important ally in Europe, plays a crucial role not only for Norwegian security, but also for European and transatlantic security. Therefore, our bilateral cooperation is important to maintain stability in the High North and in the Arctic region. Together with the UK, we will continue to demonstrate our willingness and ability to maintain deterrence and defense in the High North. Thank you so much for your attention.
State Secretary, thank you so very much for that very rich and impressive and powerful presentation. I think you've encapsulated all the many reasons why the UK sees Norway as one of its very most important allies, and done so in a very eloquent way. And now I'm going to turn to Lord Coker to give his view on these issues.
Thank you so much, State Secretary Aanerud, and thank you, can I say at the outset, for your remarks, in particular pointing out the UK as your most important European ally. It's a real privilege for us, and we recommit ourselves today in this seminar to you and to Norway, that we will work as closely as we can with you in pursuit of the objectives that you so clearly laid out for the seminar. And can I also thank you very much indeed for the very sincere comments that you made about the UK with respect to Ukraine, and also with respect to the work and support that Norway has given to that effort. And just to digress slightly from my speaking note, to say I and we agree very much with your comment about this is a fight that may be going on in the Ukraine, but it's all of our fight, and that we stand together with them in standing up for democracy and the values that we hold dear. And I think that's a really important point to make from your remarks. And Malcolm, thank you to you as well for welcoming me back to RUSI, to thank you and to the F&I involved in focusing our attention on Arctic security. And RUSI has always been at the forefront of ensuring that we reflect on issues across the world. And we may think that we're in the middle of London in this glorious building, but we are discussing something with respect to the Arctic security that is of very real relevance and very real importance to all of us in Norway and the UK, but in a much wider sense of the world. Before I came in with my officials, we looked at a globe. And if you look at the globe that's flat, or the map that's flat, you have to remember, and I hadn't remembered it, so of course the world is round. And if you reflect on the fact the world is round, you get a sense of how close some of these challenges are to us. Much more on our doorstep, but much more for us to confront as a reality than if you see it laid out flat. So I think the point that the State Secretary made with respect to the proximity to Norway, in particular with respect to now having NATO allies that give Norway a land border, I think was a point very well made. And let me say this, Malcolm, to RUSI and to others. While we all quite rightly, reflect on the flashpoints of insecurity, like Ukraine, like the Middle East, and quite rightly, they demand much of our attention, much of our reflection on what we should do and how we should respond. We cannot and must not allow ourselves to be deflected from considering other challenges that are emerging across the world. The other strategically important regions that there are, and the importance of this conference, this seminar here, is to remind us all that one of the most important, strategically important regions is now the Arctic. And when it comes to the challenges and emerging opportunities in the region, I don't think you'll find much variance among us and our Arctic allies about their nature. Whether that's the threat from climate change, which is a real threat for all of us and changing quite clearly the dynamic there, autocrats and other states wanting a bigger slice of the Arctic cake, or the emerging opportunities that there no doubt are for navigation, scientific discovery and resource exploitation. And I think you will also find agreements, not least between ourselves, between Norway and the UK, that cooperation alongside stronger defences are both the best ways of guaranteeing security and the best way of providing the stability needed to sustainably make the most of these emerging opportunities. So I'm delighted today that less than 2 months into a new UK government, we have already strengthened our cooperation with Arctic states like Norway. Last month, British F-35 jets arrived in Iceland to police NATO airspace across the Arctic region. An important statement of our intent to match up words with military power. And just days earlier, Defence Secretary Healey and Defence Minister Graham took steps to strengthen the defence partnership between Norway and the United Kingdom that the State Secretary pointed out, agreeing at their meeting in London to enhance our defence cooperation across all domains and industry, including, really important, I think, for a statement, Norway's participation in the deployment of our carrier strike group to the Indo-Pacific next year. And as many of you know, this joint deployment and enhanced partnership is built on long-standing and solid foundations. The Royal Navy, headed by HMS Prince of Wales, was at the heart of maritime exercises in northern Norway earlier this year, demonstrating our amphibious assault capabilities and the importance and the extent of interoperability across all domains between NATO allies in the region. Crucial for us to be able to do that and to not only do it, but to demonstrate that we can do it and we will do it. And it was just a year ago that our flagship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, was leading into northern waters for Operation Firedrake, a series of exercises with Norwegian and other NATO and Joint Expeditionary Force partners. These are the latest iterations of decades of military cooperation between the UK, Norway and other Arctic partners, among which our fabled joint cold weather training has been a rite of passage for our Royal Marines and helicopter pilots for more than 50 years. And in recent years, as the State Secretary pointed out, we've worked side by side doing incredibly important work in support of Ukraine, developing joint leadership of the maritime capability cooperation that has helped Ukraine regain control in the Black Sea. And I just put in this point, who would have expected or believed that at the beginning of this conflict? And again, I think all of us should be very proud of the way in which we've worked together to do that. Training tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers here in the UK as part of Operation Interflex. The new government was elected with a mandate to be a reliable partner, a dependable ally and a good neighbour. We are committed to peace and security, and above all, to defending the international rule of law wherever that is threatened, and to return the UK to the forefront of climate action. Our unshakable commitment to NATO as the cornerstone of European and global security has gone from being a line in our manifesto in the recent election campaign to becoming a central term of reference for our strategic defence review that will report in the first half of 2005. Whilst these pledges might sound broad, they provide specific reassurance to all those with an interest in Arctic security, because Arctic security depends on increasing cooperation and lowering tensions. It depends on upholding international law, such as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And it depends on building and demonstrating a robust military deterrent to deter those who believe the rules should not apply to them. So Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO as a direct consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not just an own goal by Putin and good for the alliance. It is good news for the security of the Arctic region. We acknowledge that Russia has interests in the region as an Arctic state. We understand Russia's belief in the strategic importance to it of the Arctic and the significance of its military assets on the Kola Peninsula and the realities of Russia's resource aspirations. And we will work with our allies and partners to navigate these realities, but we will also ensure that that is done in a way which accords with international law as applies to each and every one of us. Politically and environmentally, the Arctic is a region under strain and in flux. It demands our attention. It demands our attention, as I said at the beginning. Rising temperatures are remoulding landscape and turning years of uncertainty on their head. At the same time as doing that, new possibilities for trade and commerce are emerging. Possibilities that China, as one, is now also seeking to exploit, as the State Secretary has pointed out, and we need to consider the implications of that. And all the while, it's a region exposed, as I say, to the same forces of global competition as all the others. Which is why like-minded states must work to uphold international law in the Arctic as we must elsewhere. And whilst we're not an Arctic state, we have a strong relationship with 7 of the 8 states that are. And we have a responsibility, the UK has a responsibility, to support our allies and partners to preserve the stability and security of the region. For the consequences of not doing that are some that we should, that we can only reflect upon and consider. And we welcome the latest US defence strategy with respect to the Arctic, and we welcome Norway's latest long-term defence plan, which the State Secretary outlined. The Arctic will form part of our strategic defence review, and I encourage all of our allies to contribute to it. But we don't want to wait for the outcome of the review in order to reassure that our Arctic partners that we are 100% committed to strengthening our relationships with you. We are committed to closer defence collaboration and interoperability. We are committed to protecting our freedom to operate in the North Atlantic, especially in the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. And we have a steadfast commitment to strengthen NATO as the cornerstone of our European security. You can all be assured, and let the message come out from this seminar, that the UK will both be an ally of our Arctic partners and an ally of the Arctic. Thank you so much, State Secretary, for your very encouraging and important remarks. Thank you, Malcolm RUSI, for this very important seminar. And thank you to all of you as we reflect on what, as freedom-loving nations, we do to protect the Arctic from those who would undermine the rule of law. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, Minister, thank you very much for that statement, a very strong and clear statement, I think. I think one of the first statements we've had from the government about the strength of its commitment Arctic security and what the UK is doing in that regard. I'm just going to ask one question of each of our participants, and then we'll throw it open. So please do store up any questions you have. We will not have much time. State Secretary, I wonder whether there's anything you could say in relation to how your Defence Commission worked, and in particular because we're at the beginning of our defence review in the UK, and Vernon, of course, will be involved in that, and a number of people in RUSI are involved in it as well. But we all, every one of us organises our defence review in a rather different way in terms of particularly how we involve outsiders. And Norway has a particular model, particularly in regard to involving people across the political spectrum in that process. Have you got any reflections on what we might learn from your particular process?
So we have had, in many ways, a very untraditional process this time. We have done some of the things that we always do when we make new long-term plans. We have asked our Chief of Defense for his advice, which we got. But then we also appointed a Defense Commission, which consisted of experts, and they worked for a little over a year, making a very comprehensive report on the security situation that we're in and the current state of the armed forces, and gave their advice on what we would do. And both of those pieces of advice informed our long-term planning process in the ministry. At the same time, we knew that this plan would have to be much more ambitious, would involve a lot more spending, and would have to stretch for a longer period of time than previous plans had if we were going to be able to achieve the goals that we set out. So what we did this time last year, we started talking to the political parties in Parliament. And we didn't talk only to select parties. We talked to every single party in Parliament about the security situation we were in, about the state of the armed forces, about our allies, about NATO, about our security environment. And we made sure that everyone was on the same page about what the situation actually was. And I think that was crucial. And importantly, this is not something we did after we had made the plan. This was not a negotiation. This was something we did while we were making the plan. It was consultations with every single party in Parliament. And right now we have 9 parties represented in the Norwegian Parliament, from the far left to the far right. And I think that process was crucial to us ending up with a unanimous vote, with unanimous comments from Parliament to the government's plan, and to be able to achieve the kind of funding level that we have agreed on for this plan. It's a very ambitious plan, and it will be one of the most important jobs for any future government in Norway over the next 12 years. So we knew we had to have a broad majority of political parties on board in order for it to be successful. And thankfully, every single party got on board. So I think talking to Parliament and involving Parliament early was something that we did that hasn't been done before in the same way that we did it now, but I think it was crucial to us succeeding in getting a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you very much. Lord Coaker, maybe I could ask you a similar sort of question, which is that this time the SDR has been set up on a slightly different basis from compared with the past, by having an external group led by a former Labour politician, very distinguished Labour politician. Does that provide more opportunities for consultation, both within our political system, which is of course more polarised than that in Norway, but also potentially with some of our key allies?
Well, thank you, Malcolm. Yeah, we are hoping that by having an external nature of it, that we will develop a more inclusive, a wider group of people being able to contribute to it. And we've been quite open. As I said in the remarks that I made there, we welcome the input from people about what the defence review should be, and we want that to be not just a token exercise, but we want people to contribute, because it's in all of our interests that the defence review comes forward with something that is good not only for the UK but also for our allies and friends. So we have a broad sense of that, and it's a real challenge for us, because I mean, at the end of the day, what we're seeking to do is, what are the threats that the defence review should seek to meet in the future? And that's part of what we're talking about here today, is about the Arctic and the changes that are taking place in the Arctic. There are places in the Arctic opening up now that you couldn't get to before, you couldn't sail through before, you couldn't, those sorts of things. So there are opportunities and challenges, but they're very real challenges. We've heard from myself and the State Secretary, and And so by having that external organisation, those external partners to deliver that, but still part of the system, we hope that we can engage with people right across different political parties, different allies, to say, how do we actually get a defence review which seeks as broad a consensus as is possible to ensure that we meet not the threats from the past, but the threats from the future. And in meeting those threats from the future, what is the equipment and the configuration of your armed forces that you need in order to do that and to be able to do that? Not only from a hard power, number of ships, tanks, but also how you develop the relationships you have with others. And part of what the State Secretary was saying and I was saying is that the Norway-UK relationship is an example of how allies can enhance their deterrent impact and their soft power impact. And that would be an important part of it as well. So the externalisation of it is not to lose control of it, but to try and get as broad an input as we can from as broad a breadth of people in this country, but also abroad as we can as well.
Very good. Excellent. Let's throw it open to the floor. Where have we got people? Right at the very back. If you could stand up and tell the audience who you are.
I will, sure. I'm Gloria Dickey. I'm a journalist with Reuters News Agency, and my question is to the State Secretary. I understand that the government is discussing plans to increase the Nansen program for aid to Ukraine. I'm wondering if you're looking at terms of extending it for a longer period of time, or if there's a sum that's being discussed right now, and in what other ways can aid to Ukraine also be increased? I understand there was ammo, Norwegian ammo can now be produced in Ukraine, if you're looking at any other changes there. Thank you.
Please.
I'm afraid you will have to wait until our budget comes out to see what the actual agreement will be. But what I can say is that we're now at this point in time where I think Norway, like a lot of nations that have donated a lot to Ukraine over the past few years, experiences that our future effort for supporting Ukraine needs to focus more on industry. Both how we can contribute to the Ukrainian industry, but also how we can expand our own industrial base in order to be able to produce what Ukraine needs. And I think there are things that Ukraine can do better or cheaper than we can, and I think there are things that needs to be done in some of the donor countries. So that's, I guess that's all I can say for now.
Perfect. There was a gentleman just in front of the last speaker.
Thank you very much, Philippe Lefebvre, Centre for Britain and Europe. I had a question for both the State Secretary and the Minister of State on the short and medium-term threats emanating from China in the Arctic and High North. We touched on it briefly earlier, but I am keen on hearing whether you believe that's also something to focus on now, whether indeed Russia and its more obvious threats are the only focus at the moment, or whether you see China's emerging influence as something to look at too. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we ask the Minister to answer this first?
I mean, clearly, China's upfront position would be it's seeking to extend and develop its economic interests in the area, and we've seen various research ships and ships of that nature going into the area in order to seek to exploit that. And it's the point I was making before. Climate change has opened that up in a way that simply wasn't possible, wasn't available to China in the past. Are there security implications that come from that? Of course there are, and we need to reflect on that and to see where that takes us. But as I say, China is seeking to exploit the resources there. We would say to them, as to everybody else, they need to conform to international law, which again I made clear in the remarks that I've got there. And we'll have to consider and see where that goes. And we will also have to consider the extent that Russia's more overtly, although it has a resource and economic aim as well, there are also more overtly military strategic operations taking place there, which we don't see so much with China. But I think, again, another area would be to look to see how any Russia-China cooperation develops as well. And we will need to reflect on what we do in the face of what happens, which we don't know at the present time.
Very good. State Secretary.
I very much agree with what has been said. I think for now it is obvious that Russia is the biggest threat in the Arctic region, but we should be aware of Chinese ambitions in the region. We should demand of China that they keep in line with international law in the Arctic region. And we should also keep an eye on the developing strategic partnership between China and Russia and how that develops.
Yeah. Very good. Any other questions? Gentleman right in the front. And I think this is going to be the last question.
Hello, my name is Human. I'm a PhD researcher on money laundering with focus on Russia, Iran, and China. So some individuals from Norwegian community in the UK are reportedly assisting the Russian government in evasion of sanction by using the UK banks. So the UK occasionally struggle to prevent this. So how would you address that? Thank you.
I think that's for the Lord Coaker.
As part of somebody who, when I was in opposition, demanded of the government that they strengthen the laws with respect to this, and the government, to be fair, if I'm fair to the government that I was happy to see replaced by ourselves, they did strengthen they did strengthen the laws. I think the important thing for us is to use those laws and to ensure that we take action against the sanctions. And we've certainly, all of us have been calling for the strongest possible action to be taken against those who would seek to avoid, to use London as a way of hiding money, and we want to see a stronger action taken against that as possible. And my understanding is that there have been a number of high-profile cases that have taken place and increases in money, but there's more to be done with respect to that.
Can I conclude by thanking the Royal Norwegian Embassy and the Fridtjof Nansen Institute for their support and for this event, but also thank all my RUSI colleagues who've worked so hard to make this event run as smoothly as it has. So the people both from our events team and our international security team have, as always, done a superb job in that regard. And can I conclude by once again thanking our two speakers. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.